What is up, guys? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network for the late game edition of our start sits, going through the afternoon games on Sunday, the Sunday night, and the Monday night game. Quick recap of the Thursday night game for those of you that didn't watch. Calvin Ridley, biggest story right now. Looks like he is okay. He did miss pretty much the entire second half with an ankle injury, but based on current reports, they don't believe it's going to be a long-term injury. We will see as we get more information there, whether it's a low or a high ankle sprain. Obviously, if it's high ankle, I don't really care what they say about them thinking that it's not going to be a big deal. High ankle sprains are always a big deal, so we have not had that confirmed yet. So don't hear Ridley and high ankle sprain and assume that that's been the confirmation. We do not know at this point, so got to keep an eye out for that. Falcons have another week until their bye, but they do have a few extra days because they're playing on Thursday night, so hopefully we'll still see Calvin Ridley come back in Week 9. Julio Jones had himself a game. Curtis Samuel heavily involved in this game, much to the chagrin of both Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore. DJ Moore wasn't even involved until the last drive of the game. Pretty frustrating all around unless you rostered Julio Jones. Well, I guess Matt Ryan had an okay day with that couple good running plays and getting the rushing score on the ground. Other than that, it was a pretty low scoring game, pretty low offensive output overall. Not the greatest day for fantasy football, but we avoided too many crazy things from happening. All right, let's go and talk about these afternoon games. Some pretty exciting games in the early game slate. A little less excited, a little less enthralled about these later games, but there's still some good fantasy plays to talk about. So beginning with the Broncos and the Chargers, this game in Denver, we see Justin Herbert coming here and facing arguably a little bit tougher of a defense. The Denver Broncos have been picking it up in terms of their defensive output, but I don't really know that it's going to matter too much. We've seen Justin Herbert perform well against a great defense in Tampa Bay. He's been unstoppable up to this point. Let's see what he can do again here in Week 8 in this divisional matchup. Chargers trying to get their second win in a row here, whereas the Broncos just trying to salvage what's left of their season. So 45-point over-under shows that Vegas does believe this will be a little bit of a lower scoring game, and they're not really giving the Chargers much of a cushion here. They're only up -3. I thought this would actually be a bigger line, so I'm pretty in favor of betting on the Chargers in this one. Implied point total is about 24 to 21, but I think Herbert can do a little bit better than that. We see here that the Chargers have actually given up a decent amount of points to quarterbacks, running backs, and tight ends. Not really that excited about Drew Lock, but there's a couple pieces here on the Broncos side that we'll be looking at starting, whereas on the Broncos side, they have been very, very dominant against the run, not so much against receivers, but with Bouye back, definitely will be a little bit trickier for Herbert and Keenan Allen to maneuver, but at this point, I think Keenan Allen is pretty much an every week start, regardless of the matchup. Not going to be talking you out of playing him, so if you're asking me, this game is pretty easy on both sides of who we're starting. On the Chargers side, we're going to start the three guys between Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, and Hunter Henry. And I think the Chargers defense are most certainly in play here going against the Drew Lock-led Broncos that has been, prone to plenty of turnovers, as we saw last week versus the Chiefs. The Broncos are very good at giving defensive points away. So I think the Chargers have a pretty strong defensive play in this week. Now, the real question is, can you trust either Justin Jackson or Joshua Kelly? And that is definitely a toss-up. So 2 games ago versus the Saints, we saw Justin Jackson have about 65% of the snaps. You saw the majority of the touches, majority of the targets, whereas last week, Joshua Kelly ended up seeing the majority of the snaps. Justin Jackson not looking as good. Both finished with about the same amount of fantasy points, and neither of them really had a great day. So you take the fact that we don't know who was going to end up being the starter this week, and then throw them into a matchup where the Broncos have allowed some of the least amount of fantasy points to the running back position. I think this is a situation you want to avoid this week, regardless of who you have. If you're stuck, I would probably play Jackson over Kelly if you had to pick one or the other. But if you can avoid both, I think that would be a smart idea. Mike Williams is going to be a boomer bust guy that gives you an incredibly low floor and an incredibly high ceiling each week. Same thing with Jalen Guyton. Both of these guys are good for, putting up a massive fantasy day on, 2 or 3 catches where one or two of them goes for a really long touchdown, but they're not consistent enough for me to really want to be starting them. They're definitely streaming options if you need a Hail Mary play, but not someone I'd be looking to throw into my starting lineup. On the Broncos side, a couple of interesting things to watch out for here, namely with the receivers. Tim Patrick not practicing as of Thursday. Jerry Jeudy may be the only really healthy wide receiver of note heading in. I'm a little bit more excited about playing Jerry Jeudy if Tim Patrick is out, if both of them are playing. Not really excited for any of the pass catchers in this offense. With Phillip Lindsay likely to miss this week, I think Melvin Gordon is an okay play. Chargers' run defense hasn't been anything scary up to this point, and their defense against tight ends has been weak. I know Noah Fant just busted last week, but it was his first game back from an injury. Give him a little bit of time to come back fully healthy. What we saw from Noah Fant to start the year was great, and I do think that we'll see a much better day from Noah Fant here in Week 8. So Gordon and Fant are the only guys I'm excited about starting. Everyone else here on this offense I'm pretty much staying away from. Got the Chargers winning this one pretty easily. I see them scoring a bit more than Vegas is expecting. I got them winning 34 to the Broncos 23. Jumping over talking about the New Orleans Saints and the Chicago Bears, another low over-under in this one. Obviously, the Chicago Bears having one of the worst offenses in the league, but one of the more stifling defenses, whereas the Saints have basically been the opposite. Their offense has been able to move the ball even without Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders last week, even though their defense has been far worse than we would have ever imagined heading into the season, considering what they had looked like in the previous 2 years. This is a 43.5 over-under, so definitely one that Vegas is expecting this to be a bit lower in the point columns. The Saints are favored to win this one by 4.5 points. No surprise there, even on the road. The Saints have just been playing better ball. I know the Bears are 5-2, but I still feel like they're the most fraudulent 5-2 team out there with, Nick Foles throwing the ball, if you want to call it that. At some point, I imagine they're probably going to end up going back to Mitchell Trubisky, but that's not going to end up really fixing anything for them. This is just a gross game all around. So the Saints coming in and actually allowing a ton of points to quarterbacks and tight ends, average against receivers. They've still been very stout against the run, which if you didn't already need enough reason to not want to play David Montgomery, I don't blame you if you bench him this week. Obviously, he's getting enough touches and receiving yards and targets to continue warranting a start, but you have to expect his upside will definitely be capped against this tough Saints run defense. Whereas the Bears have been pretty dominant across the board against quarterbacks, running backs, and receivers. Tight ends, they've been a little bit more lenient again, so fire up Jared Cook this week for sure. The real question is whether or not we will see Michael Thomas. He apparently was back in a limited fashion at practice today, but I don't know at this point whether the plan is for him to go, or for them to hold him out one more week dealing with this hamstring injury now on top of this high ankle sprain. I am currently operating under the assumption that he will not play. We'll do another stream on Saturday night updating with these types of plays here and go over a little bit more information if we get some different pieces of news between now and Sunday. Giving you guys as much updates as we can. But based on the information that we have right now, I do not anticipate that Michael Thomas will be playing. Emmanuel Sanders looks like he is still dealing with COVID-19 symptoms, so I don't think we'll see either Michael Thomas or Emmanuel Sanders again. I do think Marquez Callaway will play, even though he was dealing with a light ankle sprain there, and then obviously Traquan Smith there. But that doesn't mean those are any of the guys that we're really excited starting here. The Bears have one of the better secondaries in the league. Alvin Kamara is going to be a fantastic start regardless of the matchup every week. He's just far too involved. He's basically this year's version of Christian McCaffrey. Not quite as explosive, but there's no way that you're benching Christian McCaffrey in any format or any matchup. As I mentioned, the Bears, the one place that they've been exploitable this year, we saw last week Gerald Everett getting that nice touchdown towards the end of the game. The one place they've been exploitable is with the tight end, so I think Jared Cook remains a pretty strong start in this one, and I think you can start the Saints defense here going against a Nick Foles-led team. They love to throw some interceptions, give up some sacks, so I think the Saints defense is a decent stream start this week. Drew Brees is someone I'm going to try to avoid this week. I don't know that his ceiling is high enough playing against this tough Bears defense to really warrant a start. Latavius Murray, I guess if you're in a desperate situation, but other than him getting goal line carries, has not really given you anywhere near the ceiling that you're hoping for, and his floor is incredibly low, so trying to avoid that situation. If I had to pick one between Traquan and Callaway, I'd probably go with Callaway, seeing that he got 10 targets last week. But I'm not really excited about either option this week going against the tough Bears secondary, trying to stick with just Kamara and Cook on offense. On the Bears side, I know Montgomery is not a great start, and if you can bench him, I would recommend doing it, but he's still seeing about 5 targets every single week, which is keeping his floor decently high in PPR leagues. He's not going to give you any blow-up games, especially not against a good Saints run defense, but he's at least getting you enough points to continue warranting a flex start. Now, Allen Robinson is the other guy to watch out for here. Currently in the concussion protocol, has not practiced all week as of Thursday. Tomorrow will be a very critical day to monitor. If Allen Robinson is not practicing tomorrow, there's a good chance we won't see him on Sunday, and then we could pivot to a guy like Darnell Mooney if you're in a desperate spot. Not someone I'm like rushing to the waiver wire to make sure I pick up now just in case, because as I mentioned before, the Bears offense has been one of the least efficient in the entire NFL. So if Allen Robinson isn't there, doesn't mean like Darnell Mooney is now going to turn into like this 30-point fantasy day guy, but he has looked good. He's been open on a ton of routes that Nick Foles has just missed him on. So if there's going to be one receiver that could potentially emerge this week, could be Mooney. I guess theoretically it could be Anthony Miller as well, although he's looked, nowhere near what we were hoping for coming into the season. So it would be a bit of a flukier play to go after Anthony Miller in this one, but Darnell Mooney would definitely be the name to throw out there if Robinson is out. And I think that Jimmy Graham is a pretty solid start in this one. The Saints giving up some of the most points to fantasy tight ends. Jimmy Graham has been the main go-to guy in the red zone for the Bears. Probably going to score at least 1 or 2 touchdowns on the day, and Jimmy Graham could definitely be the guy getting one of those. So I don't think the Saints are going to really struggle in this one. I have them winning 28-14, and that's that. Arguably the only really exciting game in these later game afternoon, nighttime slate matchups, we got the San Francisco 49ers versus the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle Seahawks coming off of their first loss last week versus the Arizona Cardinals, whereas the 49ers have started to come back up and get closer to where we were hoping or expecting to see them from the beginning of the year. Obviously still dealing with a ton of injuries. We have Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson are both out. Tevin Coleman is still a unknown at this point. They are trying to get him ready for this game. At this point, I still don't expect to see him back, but this will be another one of those situations where we might need to update you guys on Saturday night. As we get more information, I'm operating right now that Jerick McKinnon and JaMychal Hasty will end up being the guys going into this game. Same problem for the Seahawks. As of Thursday, Travis Homer, Carlos Hyde were not practicing, nor was Chris Carson. At this point, the only healthy running back on the team is DJ Dallas. I do think Carlos Hyde will eventually see some workload in practice this week, and I think Carlos Hyde will end up playing this week. I just don't know to what effect. So it's going to be a very annoying game trying to figure out the running backs here, but we're more excited about the pass-catching options in this game anyway. Both teams made that pretty easy for us, as we will get into. 54-point over-under, highest over-under on the week. Obviously, the 49ers defense has been playing well, keeping teams in check, but Vegas doesn't seem to care when it comes to the Seahawks, nor really should they. Russell Wilson has been able to dominate regardless of the matchup up to this point, so we're not really worried about the 49ers pass defense. The run defense is something definitely to keep a note because of the fact that we're already dealing with a bunch of uncertainty with injuries and not really sure who's going to get the workload with Chris Carson likely on the bench this week. This might be a situation to avoid in the run game, whereas on the Seahawks side, their defense has just been atrocious across the board, still dealing with a ton of injuries. It's not necessarily all their fault. They're pretty banged up at this point, and I do expect this defense to get better as the season goes on, but it doesn't look like they're going to be much healthier this week than they were last week, in which they gave up a ton of points to the Cardinals. So this could be a high-scoring game. I like a lot of the options in this one. The 49ers are a bit more of a conundrum. We'll talk about them first. I do think Jimmy Garoppolo is a decent start. I don't have him in my top 12, which by nature pushes him into the second guess category. But if you need a streaming play, I do think that Jimmy Garoppolo will have a good game against this putrid Seattle secondary. So if you need a streaming option, there's not many better options on the waiver wire. I think Jimmy Garoppolo will be a fine play. With Deebo Samuel out, I think Brandon Ayuk is arguably one of the biggest smash plays on the week. Should be a top 15 option at the receiver position. And then, of course, George Kittle is going to have himself a fantastic day here. Those guys are locked and loaded. Now, the real question is, if Coleman is back, do you play him? Do you play Hasty? Do you play McKinnon? Man, the situation is pretty much gross across the board because one of these guys is probably going to have a really good day and you don't know who it is. So if you want to take the coin flip, all right, let's play this situation out in one of two ways. First, we'll say if Coleman is out, what I anticipate happening is I think we'll see a little more Hasty than we will of McKinnon, but Hasty has not been involved in the pass game, whereas McKinnon has been. So McKinnon could arguably have the better role heading into a game against the Seahawks where they'll likely have to score a lot of points, won't be able to run the ball as much as they'd like to. So if Coleman is out, I feel like I would be a little bit more prone to play McKinnon in PPR, even though I know he barely saw the ball last week with Wilson out. I don't think the fact that he's in Shanahan's doghouse for whatever reason, I don't think that's going to end up playing into the game script this week. Hopefully they've been able to make amends with whatever situation happened there. I have no idea. I don't want to speculate on it, but hopefully McKinnon is no longer in the under the rain cloud that Shanahan put over him. So with Wilson out, if Coleman is out, I think McKinnon is a better play here. He's looked really good when he has actually touched the ball. Not that Hasty hasn't looked bad either. Both of these guys are okay flex plays this week. Now, if Coleman is back, that throws a massive wrench into the plan. I think Coleman would be the only guy I would trust starting this week, and I wouldn't even think about playing Hasty or McKinnon. So bear that in mind as we get more practice reports. Kevin Coleman is a very big linchpin in what we're going to do with this San Francisco backfield. Kendrick Borden is also an interesting name to throw out there if you're like desperate and really need to just pick someone off the waiver wire and throw him into your lineup if you're dealing with a bunch of buys or injuries this week. I think he runs a decent chance at scoring a touchdown in this one. Doesn't give you a massively high ceiling, but definitely gives you the ability to put up like a 15-point game. I'm not playing any defenses against the Seahawks at this point. On Seattle's side, this one's easy. We're going to play Wilson, we're going to play Metcalf, we're going to play Lockett. As I mentioned in the lead up here, the 49ers have one of the better run defenses on the league. We have Carlos Hyde dealing with a hamstring injury, hasn't practiced all week. DJ Dallas could end up being the lead back here. If Carlos Hyde is out, if he's rolled out and DJ Dallas is the only starting running back heading into this game that's healthy, I will definitely bump DJ Dallas up in my rankings, probably up to the point that you'd be starting him, just based on the nature of him being the only guy in town getting a workload, workhorse carries. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Hyde does end up playing, and I think this just ends up being a bad situation for both of these guys because this isn't a game that you want to be playing running backs against the 49ers. The run defense has been very solid, so I'm pretty much only looking at DJ Dallas if Carlos Hyde is ruled out. I'm not playing either tight end in this one. Olsen has started to get relegated. We've seen Disley get a bit more involved, especially in the red zone. So I feel like Disley is slowly going to be taken over, still recovering from that injury last year, but Disley is going to end up being the man here at some point. So if you're trying to stow away a tight end here, I do think Disley wouldn't be the worst spot on your bench, but I'm not playing a tight end against the 49ers this week in an uncertain matchup. This one's pretty easy for me and who we're starting. I think the Seahawks end up winning this one 31-20, but I have doubted the 49ers in the past and they have proved me wrong. And I know the 49ers and Seahawks always play themselves really tough, so don't be surprised if this game is a lot closer than I have predicted right here. The battle of the NFC East. The Dallas Cowboys versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Boy, oh boy, is this game nowhere near what we would have thought it would have been heading into Week 8. Dak Prescott hurt. Andy Dalton concussed, likely going to be missing this week. Carson Wentz has been playing arguably the worst of his career, although the last couple weeks he's been better, at least for fantasy purposes. Man, this is a dumb game considering the winner of this game will be leading the NFC East because Washington is on bye. It's just stupid. But hey, that's the way that the rules work. 43-point over-under. Eagles favored to win this one by 9 points. Might be a little bit low there. If Ben Denucci is playing at quarterback, I don't know that the Cowboys are going to put up any sort of a fight in this one. Cowboys defense has been putrid across the board, giving up 10th or better in terms of fantasy points across the board. Eagles have been a much better defense at slowing down running backs, but have been a good defense to exploit for quarterbacks, receivers, and tight ends. So this would have been a fantastic matchup, assuming we actually had a capable quarterback for the Cowboys. But with the injuries to their offensive line, with Dak Prescott and Andy Dalton missing this game, it's going to be rough. Ben Denucci has been getting some decent praise throughout the week in practice, but there's no way you're going to be starting him for fantasy. I think you can still start Elliott, Cooper, and Lamb. They're not the greatest plays, and they definitely have a much lower floor than you would imagine, but I don't see the Cowboys coming out and putting up no points in this game. Cooper has been heavily targeted even in bad situations. He still had a pretty decent floor, and Lamb, even though having only one carry for a yard last week, definitely a disappointing performance there. He's still getting end zone targets. So these are the only guys I'm starting. I'm not playing Dalton Schultz. I'm not playing Tony Pollard. Michael Gallup, if you even roster him at this point, there's no way you could trust him. Ben Denucci, not even in a super flex lineup would I really be excited about starting him. He could surprise, but I'm not expecting that. This is going to be a pretty gross game for the Cowboys. On the Eagles side, I'm a lot more excited about the plays here. Got Carson Wentz coming back, playing against this rough Cowboys defense. He's been really good for fantasy. He's been the number 2 quarterback over the last 3 weeks, so I think Wentz is a good stream this week. Sanders and Scott, this one's pretty simple. If Sanders plays, we'll play Sanders. If he's out, we'll play Scott. I think Sanders will miss another week. He hasn't practiced as of Thursday. They're calling it day-to-day, but likely with the bye week coming up next week, the fact that they're facing a broken Cowboys team, I don't think they're going to risk a longer-term injury for Sanders. I think they'll roll Scott out there again. He performed well for us on Thursday night last week versus the Giants. I'm going to roll him out here one more time versus the Cowboys. I think he can play Fulgham, and I'm going to throw Rager out there coming back off of IR. Looks like he's going to be involved this week. We saw some good things from him in the first couple weeks. This is a much better matchup. Look for Rager to end up stealing the show in this week when nobody else is paying attention to him. Check your waivers, see if Rager's there, pick him up, and throw him into your lineup right away. Richard Rodgers, also a good play here. I think the Eagles are going to be able to do whatever they want on offense in this game for the first time on the season. And I think the Eagles defense, obviously playing against a 7th-round drafted rookie quarterback in Ben Denucci, you definitely want to play defenses against quarterbacks like that. So should be a pretty easy game for the Eagles to win. I've got them winning 34-17, but don't be surprised if the margin is even larger. Question from Edward Mason. If I had to trade Justin Jefferson for a running back, what would be the most I could get? I mean, that's really league dependent, right? I could tell you who I would try to get, but it's really going to come down to, do you have anyone in your league that is a bit more enthusiastic over Justin Jefferson than they theoretically should be? I mean, arguably what you're trying to do in that situation is get a weekly starting running back that you're going to be pretty excited about. Obviously, if you could get, Nick Chubb and a starting asset, that would be a decent move because Nick Chubb has been injured for a while. Maybe the person that has him has forgotten what he could do. Jonathan Taylor obviously would be the number 1 guy I'd be going for, or even an injured guy like Miles Sanders or Joe Mixon that will be dominant from week 10 on. At this point, you're really just trying to shore up a playoff push here, and you're going to really want running backs that you're going to be able to trust every single week. So I do really like DeAndre Swift and Chase Edmonds, but Justin Jefferson has been really good. So I feel like that would kind of be like a 1-for-1 where I feel like the value is the same. If you're trying to jump up in value, you're trying to get like a Jonathan Taylor type. And I do think Justin Jefferson is a start this week. We talked about it in the game yesterday, talking about the Packers and the Vikings. I know Jair Alexander has been a really dominant force for the Packers. I don't know that he's going to end up if he is going to shadow someone, I would be a little bit more nervous about him shadowing Jefferson over Thielen because he doesn't typically dip into the slot. But the Vikings have mixed up Thielen and Jefferson slot snaps enough that I don't think that we're going to see a 100% shadow game from Jair Alexander. I think he'll end up just staying on his side of the field. And I think we'll get enough targets for both Thielen and Jefferson to give both of them a decent start this week. Okay, let's talk about that Monday night game, assuming it's going to happen. I think it will, but we have had a few positive COVID cases for both of these teams. We have a positive case for an offensive lineman for the Giants, and then a training staff for the Buccaneers tested positive as well. No other reports as of this moment. Doesn't look like there's any jeopardy of this game being canceled, but we're going to have to monitor that situation going forward. Hopefully we have some more news before Sunday morning, because obviously waiting for someone in your Monday night lineup and then finding out that the game isn't going to happen would be really detrimental, because you can't pivot at that point. So hopefully we'll have good information come Saturday and Sunday. But as of now, it doesn't look like there's any real risk of this game not playing. I just wanted to throw that out there just in case you guys were wondering about that. So in terms of how we think this game is going to go, I think there's only one way that this game really can go. The Giants haven't surprised us at all at this point, and it is the NFL, so things do happen, but I don't trust the Giants at all to really put up a decent performance in this one. The Bucs are favored to win this one in Vegas by 12. Absolutely, massive underdog for the home team here for the Giants. 45-point over-under. Bucs are implied to score about 28 points. Makes sense after Brady's been throwing 5 touchdowns all over the place this year. The Buccaneers defense has been lights out across the board. The Giants defense has been underrated, but we did see the Eagles put up a decent game against them last week. I don't really care. The Buccaneers offense is too good to be slowed down. Now, Chris Godwin injuring his finger, being out this week, definitely makes Mike Evans a much stronger play. And if you're looking for another sell window for Mike Evans, this will be your week. You're going to play Mike Evans this week, and then following this week, that is the time you would be willing to sell Mike Evans. When Antonio Brown is coming back, Chris Godwin is going to be coming back at some point with that finger injury, but this should be your last really solid start for Mike Evans. Mike Evans is arguably a top 15, maybe even a top 10 play this week. Brady, I think you can start him every week at this point until he proves otherwise. He's been dominant for fantasy over the past couple weeks, really starting to gel in this offense. Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette, I'm comfortable starting both of them. Ronald Jones is probably going to continue to see the goal line carries going forward, but Leonard Fournette more involved in the passing game, gives you a decent floor in PPR. As we mentioned, Mike Evans, one of the better starts this week, and Gronk is back, at least thus far. Past couple weeks, he's looked like his old self, so we're going to continue staying in those flames going forward, and we're going to play the defense against the Giants pretty much every week, considering the amount of turnovers that they give up, and sacks for that matter. Scott Miller, I guess you could argue would be a decent start, but every time we argue that he's a decent start, he gooses us. So he's still kind of on my crap list. I'm avoiding him. Tyler Johnson would be the guy I would throw a dart at if you absolutely are in a desperate spot and just needed to pick someone off the waivers. Last time Chris Godwin was out, we saw Tyler Johnson have an expanded role, and with Godwin out again this week, we could see Johnson have a pretty decent game. On the Giants side, the only guy I'm really comfortable with starting is Sterling Shepard. He was the favorite target of Daniel Jones last week, and he looked really solid in that setting there. Slayton, obviously a boom-bust receiver at this point, and I don't expect many booms against the Buccaneers. If you need an upside shot, I guess Slayton does carry more upside than Shepard, but I think Shepard gives you a pretty decent floor, especially in PPR. Wayne Gallman saw the majority of the carries after Devonta Freeman was hurt. We don't know at this point that Freeman will or will not play, but the Bucs' run defense is so strong, and I'm expecting this to be a rout. I don't really want to be playing Gallman. Maybe he gives you a decent floor because he'll be involved in the pass game, but not someone I'm looking to go out there and start. Golden Tate, Evan Ingram, both of these guys are players that you're really hoping to not have to roster. They give you an okay ceiling with a pretty low floor. Both guys I'm really just trying to avoid, if at all possible. You can probably already tell the way I'm leaning with this one. I've got the Buccaneers winning this one 35-14. And yeah, so we'll see if Brady ends up winning another MVP. All right, that is it for the late games. Much less exciting games here than the early ones, but go back and check. I posted up all the early games if you guys have any questions about those. Yeah, and then let's see. Should I trade Robbie Anderson? Oh, yes. If you can get AJ Brown for Robbie Anderson, oh my goodness, yes. AJ Brown to me is like a top 5 receiver at this point. If you find someone that's actually willing to do that, they're off their rocker. You should 100% do that. Edwards or Leonard Fournette. I would still play Edwards, Hilaire. just based on the fact that he is still seeing the higher leverage touches there. Play the Jets, not the greatest defense in the world. Fournette definitely has been very up and down this year, and we'll see. Maybe Fournette ends up having the better day, but I'm still going to stick with Clyde as long as he's going to continue seeing a good number of touches there on the best offense in the league. All right, guys, thank you for joining us. I do appreciate you watching. Go back and check this out tomorrow. We'll be clipping these individual games if you have any questions there. And I hope you guys have a good evening. We'll see you later.